The first time the alien cubs called him Pack, Jace didn't even realize what they meant. He thought it was just another of their mispronunciations, the way their three-tongued mouths struggled with human sounds, spitting out half-garbled syllables whenever he tried teaching them English. But then the smallest one, a fur ball of orange and gray with oversized eyes, pressed its head against his leg and chirped the word again, louder this time, more certain. The rest followed, a chorus of clicking voices, declaring something that made the predators lurking in the shadows pause. To the cubs, Jace wasn't just a human visitor anymore. He was Pack. That single word was enough to shift the balance of everything on that dangerous world. Jace had come to Trelverfor against the advice of almost everyone he knew. The planet had a reputation even among the frontier colonists, a place that chewed up settlers, explorers, and surveyors alike. The jungle stretched for endless kilometers, dripping with life that was always either venomous, spined, or teeth-bearing. The native Troveran people had endured here for millennia, a lithe, furred species that had evolved pack bonding and sharp claws just to survive. But survival wasn't a guarantee, not even for them. And that's why Jace was there. Not as a soldier. Not as a colonist. He was a biologist, part of a mixed-species expedition hired to catalog the ecosystem and figure out if there was any way to make it safer for long-term habitation. At least, that had been the plan until the predators attacked the settlement outpost 2 weeks into his stay, scattering families and leaving half the expedition missing. That was how he ended up here, stranded, dirty, living in a half-collapsed tree hollow with 5 terrified cubs who had somehow attached themselves to him. At first, he tried to find the adults. He tracked the claw marks, the blood trails, the signs of flight. Nothing. It was as if the predators had swallowed the pack whole. When the cubs, barely the size of earth dogs, refused to let him go, clutching his clothes with their hooked claws and hissing if he tried to walk away, he gave in. Survival was easier together, he told himself. But Jace wasn't prepared for the way they looked at him. Every day, as he foraged or set traps or taught them how to make a fire using steel shards and dry moss, those huge eyes followed him. They mimicked him, tried to copy his movements, even when their anatomy didn't quite match. He laughed the first time one of them tried to hold a stick like a spear, wobbling it clumsily before dropping it on its own tail. But they were serious. They were learning. And they were watching him with the same gaze Earth wolves once gave to early humans. Something ancient stirred in Jace when he realized it. It all came to a head one night when the jungle went silent. Silence on Trelverfor was never good. It meant predators. The cubs pressed close to him, fur bristling, eyes wide. That was when the littlest one nudged his hand, chirped once, and said it. Pack. The others followed. Over and over. Pack. 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 The predators circling in the dark, a pack of sleek scaled beasts with jaws too wide for their faces, hesitated. Jace saw it in their reptilian eyes. Confusion. Wariness. As if they had expected easy prey but now saw something else entirely. Something older, something dangerous. And in that instant, Jace understood what the cubs had done. They hadn't just claimed him as their caretaker. They had rewritten the rules of survival. He wasn't protecting them. They had made him one of them. The predators slunk back into the night, and Jace exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. When morning came, the cubs followed him into the forest as if it was the most natural thing in the world. He tried to explain in English. No, stay here, too dangerous. But they just chirped, Pack, again and marched after him. He was their alpha now, whether he liked it or not. It was absurd. It was terrifying. And it was working. The first real test came at the river crossing. The cubs had always feared the water, and for good reason. The serpents that lived beneath the surface could drag full-grown Troveran under in seconds. Jace found a fallen log and began balancing across, careful and deliberate. The cubs whined, their claws clicking nervously against the mud. But when he reached the other side and looked back, they didn't stay behind. One by one they followed. Clumsy, trembling, but determined. When the youngest slipped, Jace was already moving. He dropped to his stomach, grabbed its scruff, and hauled it back up onto the log just as the water below rippled with hungry movement. His heart hammered, his palms slick with sweat. But when the cub shook itself off and scampered to the other side, it didn't look afraid anymore. It looked proud. The others chirped approval, crowding around Jace, and once again the word came. Pack. That night, as the cubs curled against him for warmth, Jace stared into the fire and wondered if he was losing his mind. He had studied dozens of alien species before, but none of them had ever claimed him like this. Humans weren't supposed to be part of this ecosystem, and yet, the cubs had decided otherwise. And the predators, those cold, calculating eyes in the dark, had seen it too. What unsettled him most wasn't their acceptance. It was how natural it felt. When he closed his eyes, he didn't just see frightened children clinging to him. He saw echoes of humanity's own past, fires lit in the night, hunters gathering, the bond of survival that once united humans with wolves, dogs, even horses. On Earth, those bonds had shaped civilization itself. And here, on a world millions of light years away, it was happening again. The cubs weren't just learning from him. They were rewriting their instincts. And maybe, so was he. By the fourth day, Jace realized the predators were watching them more closely. He could feel their presence in the brush, hear their low growls at the edge of hearing. They weren't attacking outright anymore. They were testing. Measuring. And then came the moment that made Jace's blood run cold. At dusk, while he was setting snares, one of the predators stepped into the open. Its body was sleek and muscled, its scales modeled to blend with the undergrowth. It didn't charge. It didn't growl. It just stared at him. Behind him, the cubs chirped nervously, forming a cluster around his legs. Jace tightened his grip on the sharpened branch he'd been using as a spear. His heartbeat thundered. The predator's eyes flicked from him to the cubs and back. Then, slowly, it bared its teeth in something that wasn't quite a snarl. Almost curiosity. It stepped back into the shadows and vanished. That was when Jace knew. The predators understood what the cubs had declared. He wasn't just another human stranded on their world. He was pack now. And predators always thought twice before attacking a pack. The question was, how long would that protection last? Because on Trevor 4, nothing stayed safe for long. The predators didn't strike immediately, but everyone could feel them waiting. The forest had gone too quiet. Every natural sound, the whistlebirds, the scurrying leaf dwellers, even the drip of water from the canopy, seemed to vanish when the unseen eyes fixed on the clearing. The cubs didn't notice it at first. They were too busy clustering around Daniel, still arguing in low tones about whether he was officially pack, or if that was just something cubs said when they felt safe. But Daniel felt it. Humans had instincts too, instincts shaped by centuries of living where predators stalked unseen. The first rustle came from the underbrush, sharp and deliberate. Daniel's head snapped up, and he froze in place. He didn't call out. He didn't shout. He didn't wave his arms. Instead, he slowly, carefully, put one finger to his lips and tapped the air for silence. Somehow, the cubs obeyed. They looked at him with wide, confused eyes but hushed immediately. That alone was remarkable. Even adult instructors couldn't usually quiet cubs so quickly. Daniel crouched low, his hand brushing the dirt, feeling the tremors. "They're circling," he whispered, not really for the cubs but for himself. His words made a few of them stiffen. One whispered back, "Who's circling?" Daniel's gaze cut through the trees. "The ones that were here before me. The ones who don't want you to go home." The realization seemed to crash into the cubs all at once. The Yekri had been warned of predators in this sector of the training grounds, but they hadn't expected to encounter them, not in broad daylight, and not this close to camp. Their instructor was supposed to have been nearby, supervising. Yet the moment Daniel mentioned it, the cubs realized the truth. The instructor hadn't returned since vanishing hours ago. The forest had left them alone with something hunting. Panic spread across the group, but Daniel cut it short with a gesture. "No sudden noise. No sudden movement. That's how they wait for you, to scatter." The cubs hesitated, their survival instincts telling them to run. But Daniel wasn't panicking. He looked, calculating. His calmness created a gravity that pulled them in. They huddled closer to him as though instinctively obeying a new leader. Another rustle. This time to the left. Then a heavy thud on the right. Daniel rose to his full height, scanning the tree-line. He didn't have a weapon. No blade, no staff, no armor. The cubs had claws and natural reflexes stronger than his. And yet, the predators weren't striking. Not yet. They were probing. Testing. "They're watching us," Daniel said, his voice steady. "Trying to figure out if we're weak enough to break." "Are we?" whispered one cub, her scales bristling. Daniel crouched again, dragging a stick through the dirt to make a crude map. "That depends. Do you trust me?" The cubs exchanged looks. Trust? He was an outsider, not even of their species. Their instructor had drilled into them not to follow strangers, especially not prey world aliens. But when the next growl rippled from the shadows, every cub shifted closer to Daniel as if their bodies decided before their minds could argue. "Good," Daniel said quietly, almost to himself. "Because if you run, you'll all die. If you stay, maybe we have a chance." The cubs swallowed hard, nodding. He pointed at the dirt map. "They're circling. They want us to panic so they can pick you off one by one. That's how predators work: pressure, chaos, then kill. But predators hate one thing: prey that fights back together." "You mean us?" a cub asked incredulously. "Yes. You," Daniel said firmly. "You're not just cubs. You're a pack. And a pack fights as one." That word again, pack. The cubs felt it strike something deep in them. Their species knew the word, but it wasn't the same. For them, it meant a hunting cluster, temporary, for food or for training. For Daniel, the way he said it, it sounded heavier. Stronger. Binding. The predators didn't wait long to test them. A massive shape lunged from the shadows, its body a blur of muscle and bone ridges, its mouth lined with fangs long enough to snap bone. The cubs shrieked instinctively, but Daniel moved first. He didn't attack. Instead, he hurled a fist-sized rock straight at the beast's snout. The crack startled it mid-pounce, forcing it to veer away and vanish into the undergrowth again. "See?" Daniel barked. "They bleed. They fear pain. And they don't expect resistance." The cub's fear turned into something else, confusion mixed with the first flickers of courage. One asked breathlessly, "But what if they come again?" "They will," Daniel said bluntly. "So we make it cost them. We don't run. We don't scatter. We make them believe we're not worth it." It was insane. It was reckless. And yet, it was working. For the first time since the predators had closed in, the cubs didn't feel like doomed prey. They felt like something more. Daniel pointed to the trees. "You two, gather stones. Heavy as you can carry. You 3 branches, sharpened ends if you find them. You." He pointed at the largest cub, a lumbering, scale-plated youth. "Stand in the center. If they get close, you're the wall. The rest of us will cover you." The cubs didn't even question why they were listening to him. They scattered to their tasks, quickly returning with crude tools. It wasn't much, but in Daniel's hands it was something. By the time the predators tried again, the cubs were ready. A dark shape darted forward, but it was met not by panic screams but by a hail of thrown rocks and sharpened sticks. One stone cracked against the predator's shoulder. It snarled and withdrew, more surprised than hurt. The cubs were panting, wide-eyed, but Daniel only grinned. "Not bad. Not bad at all." The predators didn't retreat. They circled again, closer now, testing the edges. The cubs felt their courage waver, but Daniel stood tall, scanning the tree-line with eyes that had seen worse. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "Predators aren't gods. They bleed, they fear, they choose easy targets. We're going to teach them that we're the wrong choice." For the next hour, it became a war of nerves. The predators lunged, probed, tested, and each time, the cubs held together, following Daniel's commands. They shifted in formation, covering each other, throwing stones, driving sticks into the ground to make barriers. They weren't hunters anymore. They were defenders. And slowly, impossibly, the predators began hesitating. The cubs noticed it first. "They're slowing down," one whispered. Daniel nodded grimly. "Because they thought you were prey. But now they're not so sure." It wasn't over. If anything, the danger was only growing. The predators weren't retreating yet. They were gathering. The cubs could hear more of them now, dozens closing in. The real assault hadn't begun. The cubs trembled. "There are too many," one said. Daniel crouched low again, meeting their eyes one by one. "Then we make them believe there are too many of us," he explained quickly, drawing more marks in the dirt. His plan wasn't elegant, wasn't grand. But it was clever. Every cub had a role, some to shout, some to throw, some to charge in short bursts to create noise. Together they would make themselves seem larger, fiercer, a threat instead of a meal. The cubs hesitated, but when he finished, something in their eyes had changed. They weren't just following orders anymore. They were believing. The growls in the trees grew louder. The predators were massing, ready to strike all at once. The cubs clutched their stones and sticks, their scales bristling, hearts hammering. Daniel stood with them, his jaw tight, his gaze unflinching. And then the first howl ripped through the clearing. The predators charged. The cubs didn't run. They roared back. The predators came at dawn. Not a metaphorical dawn, not a slow creep of shadows, but the real thing, the moment the twin suns crested the horizon and poured molten light across the jungle canopy. Every sound seemed sharpened by the rising heat. Birds took flight in ragged patterns, their cries more frantic than usual. Even the vines looked taut, as though bracing for what was coming. Jack noticed it first, because he always did. He sat cross-legged at the edge of the camp while the cubs finished the last scraps of dried fruit. His eyes narrowed, scanning a distant line of trees. The jungle wasn't empty, it never was. But now it was quiet in the wrong way. The kind of silence predators carried with them when they hunted. The cubs didn't hear it at first. They were playing, tackling each other and shouting the human word they'd adopted. "Pack!" As if the syllables themselves were a shield. But then the eldest, Kareth, froze mid-leap. His ears flattened against his skull. He gave a low growl that silenced the others instantly. Even without human words, they knew what it meant: danger. Jack rose slowly. He wasn't armed in any official sense. The council hadn't exactly provided humans with weaponry when they dropped him off as a liaison. All he had was a heavy survival knife and a piece of sharpened steel pipe he'd scavenged from a wreck. But his stance said something weapons couldn't. He wasn't retreating. He wasn't calling for help. He was bracing. The first predator revealed itself with a sound like fabric tearing. A beast as tall as 3 men crashed through the undergrowth, its 6 eyes gleaming, and its maw bristling with jagged fangs. Behind it, more shapes slithered between trees, sleek, muscular, coordinated. A hunting pack. Not wild. Directed. Jack swore under his breath. He knew this wasn't random. The council had sent the predators. Or maybe one of the rival species who couldn't stand the idea of humans being treated as equals. Either way, someone had decided the best way to resolve the human problem was to feed him and the cubs to monsters. The cubs screamed, but Jack's voice cut through it like steel. "Pack! Circle up! Behind me, now!" They obeyed without hesitation. That one word, pack, had rewired something inside them. They didn't think of him as an outsider anymore, not even as a protector. He was theirs, and they were his. The predators lunged. Jack didn't fight like they expected. He didn't posture or roar back like the alien warriors did. He moved low, fast, unpredictable. When the first beast snapped at him, Jack didn't dodge backward. He charged forward, sliding beneath its throat and ramming the sharpened pipe upward. The metal screeched against bone but found a soft spot. Hot blood sprayed across his arms. The predator shrieked and collapsed, thrashing violently. The cubs shouted behind him, high-pitched cries mixing fear and exhilaration. Pack! 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 The others didn't retreat. They were intelligent enough to adapt. Two flanked, jaws wide, while a third tried to circle toward the cubs. Jack spun, grabbed a burning log from the fire pit, and hurled it straight into its face. Flames burst against fur, and the beast shrieked, rolling in pain. But now there were 7 more pushing through the trees. The ground shook beneath their charge. The cubs whimpered, clinging to each other. Even Karetha's courage wavered. Jack did what he always did, calculated. Fear wasn't useful. Anger wasn't useful. What mattered was probability, terrain, the one thing every soldier learned on Earth: control the ground, and you control the fight. Kareth! He barked. Take the little ones! Get to the ridge! The eldest cub shook his head, trembling. We don't leave pack! Jack crouched to meet his gaze, even with predators rushing closer. His voice went cold and sharp. You don't leave me! You follow orders. Now move! The cub's throat bobbed. Then he grabbed the youngest and bolted, the others stumbling after him. For a moment Jack stood alone, the jungle thundering with death. He smiled grimly. It reminded him of home, of the training ranges where humans had been called reckless, suicidal even. What aliens never understood was that humans didn't fight to survive. They fought to win. The predators struck in waves. Claws slashed, teeth snapped, tails lashed. Jack ducked, weaved, struck with precision. He stabbed a throat, jammed burning ash into a wound, kicked a knee joint until bones splintered. For every beast that fell, another 2 pressed in. His arms burned, his chest heaved, but his mind was razor clear. Above him, the cubs had reached the ridge. They watched, wide-eyed, as the human bled and roared and refused to fall. Then the biggest predator emerged. Larger than the others by half, its scarred hide glistened with age and dominance. It didn't charge. It studied. And then, with horrifying intelligence, it signaled the others to spread out, trapping Jack in a tightening circle. He knew what that meant. He couldn't win alone, not against this many. The cubs would be next. But he wasn't alone. Kareth suddenly howled from the ridge, a long, shrill sound that vibrated through the jungle. The younger cubs echoed him. And then, to Jack's astonishment, they didn't run. They slid down the ridge, snatching up stones, sticks, even sharpened bones they'd kept hidden. They screamed one word as they rushed to his side. Pack! The predators hesitated. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Jack's laugh was wild, feral, almost humanly unhinged. He slammed his knife into another beast and bellowed. That's right! You hear that? They're not yours anymore. They're mine! The cubs threw rocks, jabbed with sticks, clawed with their small but furious hands. They weren't strong, but they were together. And with Jack anchoring their line, they were something more than prey. The great predator finally lunged. Jack met it head on. Its jaws clamped down on his shoulder, teeth tearing through flesh. Pain exploded white in his vision. But he didn't fall. He grabbed its jaw with his free hand, shoved the knife deep into its throat, and ripped sideways. The beast's death scream shook the trees. When it collapsed, the others faltered. Their circle broke. Some tried to retreat, slinking into the shadows. Jack spat blood and pointed his knife at them. Go on, then! Run! Tell whoever sent you what happens when you hunt my pack. The cubs howled behind him, a chorus of defiance that sent the last of the predators scattering into the jungle. The battlefield stank of blood and smoke. Jack swayed, his shoulder torn and bleeding, his arms shaking. But when the cubs surrounded him, pressing close, chanting, Pack, pack, pack! In trembling voices, he knew the fight wasn't just survival anymore. It was proof. Proof to the cubs, to the predators, to whoever had set this trap. Humans didn't bow. Humans didn't break. And if you came for their pack, you'd pay in blood. The predators weren't supposed to retreat. Predators didn't retreat. That was the rule, as ancient and immovable as the cycle of night and dawn. And yet, there they were, massive forms hunched low, their luminous eyes burning from the shadows of the tree-line, unwilling to cross the threshold into the clearing where a single human stood. Around his legs, the cubs pressed close, their fur bristled but their tiny growls full of borrowed courage. For the first time in living memory, the most feared hunters of the plains hesitated. The packs of the world had seen prey scatter, scream, and die, but never stand in defiance like this. Never look back at death and laugh. Elias didn't raise his weapon. He didn't need to. The predators had learned something their instincts couldn't prepare them for. Humanity wasn't prey. Humanity wasn't rival predator either. Humanity was pack, and when you threatened their pack, they became something else entirely. The cubs huddled tighter. One nuzzled at his boot, a whimper muffled in the leather. Elias crouched, brushing his hand along the little one's ear, steady but calm. The predators snarled, rippling growls like an earthquake rolling through the night. But none of them charged. They prowled in a wide arc, testing the boundary of fear, trying to rediscover the courage their bloodline was supposed to have granted them. Elias simply met their eyes. His breathing was steady, calm as stone. His voice, when it came, wasn't for them at all. "You stay behind me," he told the cubs softly. "No running. No crying. Just breathe. You're not prey anymore." It wasn't bravado. It was simple truth, delivered with the steady conviction of someone who had already decided his place in the fight. The largest predator shifted its weight forward, massive shoulders lowering, its jaws hanging open to reveal teeth long as knives. A leader. Its breath misted in the cool air. The cubs whimpered again, but then one of them, the boldest, lifted its tiny muzzle and yipped. Not in fear. Not in a plea. But in imitation. Challenge. The forest went still. Elias grinned. "That's it. You've got it." The predator's eyes flicked from cub to human and back. Its head tilted, confusion flickering through instincts that should have screamed for blood. No creature taught its young to face danger. No prey encouraged defiance. No predator dared foster challenge inside its pack. But here was a human, and already the cubs were learning new rules, rewriting instincts with something far older than teeth and claws. Something that reached deeper, loyalty. The stalemate stretched, but Elias knew it couldn't last. Hunger and bloodlust would override fear eventually. The predators would come, one way or another. He shifted slightly, lowering one arm protectively, his other hand brushing the weapon at his side. He didn't want to fire it, not yet. Because this wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a lesson. For the cubs. For the predators. For anyone watching from the shadows. "They called me Pack," Elias murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "So that's what I'll be." The predators finally surged. They didn't come as one. They never did. They flanked, split, and circled, a wave of death from three directions. Elias moved, not with speed but with precision, shepherding the cubs behind him with a firm sweep of his boot as he turned to face the first beast lunging in. His weapon snapped up, but at the last moment, he twisted, not firing, but slamming the butt of the rifle across its jaw. The creature's head whipped sideways with a bone-crunching snap, and it collapsed, stunned more by surprise than by force. The others faltered. Elias took the opening. He moved like the predators themselves, low, weaving, striking not with the desperation of prey but the confidence of something that chose when and how to kill. Another lunged, jaws snapping. Elias rolled, jammed his rifle sideways into its mouth, and shoved until it gagged. His fist cracked across its snout. The beast tumbled backward, coughing blood. The cubs didn't run. Their tiny forms huddled close, eyes wide but no longer wet with fear. They were watching. Learning. Their small voices yipped again, not shrill this time but steady. The predator leader charged. No hesitation now. All muscle, all fury, a mountain of claws and rage barreling forward. Elias braced. He couldn't outmatch its mass, but he didn't have to. Timing was enough. He stepped aside at the last heartbeat, pivoting with the precision of a soldier drilling 1,000 hours. His rifle barrel jammed upward, catching beneath the beast's throat, and its own momentum carried it into the strike. The force rattled his arms, nearly tore the weapon from his hands, but the predator stumbled. That was enough. Elias followed with a sharp twist and a slam of his shoulder, forcing the towering thing to crash sideways into the dirt. Dust and blood filled the air. The clearing shook. Elias didn't roar. Didn't scream. Didn't posture like the predators. He simply planted his boots and stood tall, breathing steady, weapon leveled without trembling. The message wasn't in noise. It was in silence. An unbroken will. The predators withdrew. Not far. Not defeated. But shaken in a way their kind had never been. Their instincts screamed for flesh, but something colder cut through them, memory. A recognition that this fight had crossed some invisible line. That there were things on this world, things walking upright, calm in the face of death, that didn't fit in the old categories of predator and prey. Things that rewrote the rules. Slowly, growling, snarling, eyes blazing, the pack slipped back into the forest. One by one, their shapes melted into the trees. The last to go was the leader, its golden eyes burning long from the shadows before it finally turned away. Elias let the silence settle. Then, slowly, he crouched down to the cubs. Their tiny bodies trembled, but not with fear now. With something else. With energy they didn't understand. The boldest one pressed its nose against his palm, whining softly. Another leaned against his knee. Then, in unison, their small voices piped up again. Pack. Elias froze. The word struck harder than any predator's claws could have. Not because it was strange, but because of what it meant. They weren't parroting anymore. They understood. On some instinctive, primal level, they meant it. They were his now. Not by blood. Not by species. But by choice. He smiled, rough and tired but real. Yeah. Pack. The next days spread the story like fire. The cubs carried it in their eyes, in the way they no longer flinched at shadows. The forest carried it in the silence of predators keeping their distance. And when others came, villagers, hunters, travelers, they saw the same thing, a human sitting calmly in the grass, cubs curled around him like stars in orbit. They saw predators watching from the tree-line, unwilling to cross. They whispered of it at first. Then they shouted it. The tales spread to outposts, to colonies, to the council itself. That the Death World's predators had learned fear. That the cubs had learned courage. That a human had become something greater than either predator or prey. Not a myth. Not a monster. Pack. And in that word lay something the galaxy had never prepared for, the knowledge that humanity could bond not just with each other, not just with allies, but with anything. Anything at all. Even the wild. Even the dangerous. Even the impossible. The predators would return, of course. Hunger didn't vanish. But the next time they came, it wouldn't just be Elias standing. It would be the cubs, stronger, older, sharper. It would be a new kind of pack, born from fear, forged in defiance, and sealed with loyalty that teeth and claws could never break. Elias looked out at the tree-line, where glowing eyes still watched. He smiled again, calm and steady. Come back whenever you like, he murmured. We'll be waiting. The cubs yipped in reply. The predators turned away. And the galaxy shivered, because for the first time, they understood that humanity didn't just survive. Humanity belonged. And those who belonged to them would never be prey again.